Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Goldberg of Optimus Performance, bringing you practical tips and ideas on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. As you can see, I have a guest today. Her name is Sarah Brown. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me today. I'll introduce Sarah. Dr. Sarah Brown is an expert on personalizing work to the unique interests, strengths, and needs of the workforce. A former managing director at Accenture, she is now on a mission to reach 250,000 women with knowledge of their unique gifts and the tools to be happy, successful, and understood at work. Her method is called self-coaching. Well, I think everybody would like to embrace that, not just women. I think everybody's seeking satisfaction in whatever they do. And of course, at work, and a lot of people disengage because they're not finding that. So tell us how you got into this work to begin with. What led you down this path? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that most recently in my corporate career, and I had a pretty long corporate career, I was managing director with Accenture. And I began to observe a phenomenon, which was probably there the whole time. I was just becoming aware of it. And it wasn't just in Accenture, but it was in Accenture. It was in my clients. It was in networking organizations. It was across the board. It was a large number of mid-career professionals. And in my case, they tended to be mostly female that were in the wrong jobs and they were miserable. They were so miserable, they were making other people miserable. And they could tell you that they were miserable. But if you asked them what they wanted, they couldn't answer the question. So here they are, miserable at work, but they don't know what's going to make things better. And I knew enough at that time to know if you don't know what you want, you're unlikely to get it. But I began to observe another phenomenon, and that is that the individuals who invested in hiring executive coaches were getting out of that rut. And I got very curious about what is it that those coaches are doing. And I realized that what the coaches were doing was unlocking what was unique about each person, helping that person translate that into goals that were uniquely suited to who they were, and then supporting them and taking the action to go after achieving those goals. Now, a lot of executive coaches use proprietary means for doing that. You know, they may have their own methodology for doing it, their own process that they work people through. But the gist of what they were doing to help individuals, and in my case, mostly women, get out of the rut was that. Figure out who they are, what makes them unique, what goals would be uniquely suited to them, and then supporting them on taking action to actually achieve it. And it became my mission to make that power, the power of that process, available to everyone, whether they could afford to hire an executive coach or not. And that's why I call it self-coaching, is because essentially what I'm doing is arming an individual with the tools that he or she can use to actually get the value out of that process of discovering who they are uniquely, what are the goals that are going to be uniquely suited to them, and what action do they need to take to achieve it.
So let's drill that down a little bit. So you start, the first step, it sounds, is like who they are, helping them discover more insight into themselves. Can you talk about that part of it, that process? Sounds like the first step.
That is the first step. And the way we're all complex individuals and complex human beings, and we all have many, many aspects of our unique personalities. But what I do is to simplify this by looking specifically at an individual's interests. Those are the activities that they just love doing. They would do even if pay were not an issue. Their strengths, what they're uniquely gifted at doing, how they go about it as a way to be successful, and more importantly, their motivational needs. And that, I think, is the distinguishing factor around the way that I approach this. Because once you understand a person's motivational needs, you can describe the environment that they're going to thrive in, that's going to minimize stress for them, that frees them up to pursue interests using their strengths. And the way I do that, you can see the banner back here with the book of you. And that was actually my first offering when I retired, called the Book of You. And the way I assess interest, strengths, and needs is by using a world-renowned personality profiling instrument called the Berkman method. And the Berkman method has been used for over 60 years for millions and millions of people, but it has historically only been used in the C-suite of large companies because it is so complex. It takes a myriad of consultants to kind of interpret it. And it takes a long time to understand it. So I'm taking the data from that and simplifying it and putting it into a book that I call the Book of You. And what that does is to distill an individual's unique interests, strengths, and needs, and describe it in a process that he or she can use with another individual to get very clear about what that means for him or her in the workplace, the kinds of jobs that are going to make that person happy, the kinds of tasks in which they are likely to be more successful, and more importantly, what kind of work environment do they need to stay out of stress? And armed with that information, they can then make small changes in the job that they're in to reduce stress, use more of their strengths, pursue more of their interests, or they can look at how to select jobs that are uniquely suited for them.
Okay. So you take the results from the Berkman report and you actually write a book, or I guess it's in a book form, but it's sounds like a report that you feed back to them what they need to know to make better decisions about either their current work situation or a potential work shift, if you want to call it that.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And there's one more step, and that is the process of actually working that through with another human being. And that other human being is very important in the process. There's an interesting story, Stephen, about Lincoln. And if you've got an international audience, let me just clarify that Lincoln was a president in the United States during a very tumultuous time in our history. And the country was at war and was massively divided on the issue of slavery. And he wanted to make an impact on slavery. And his first step out of the gate was called the Emancipation Proclamation. But there were all kinds of questions in his mind about that. What's included, when to do it, how many territories, how far should he go? There were lots of things he needed to clarify in his own mind. So he called a friend of his to come in to the cabinet room and debate this with him. And the person he called was Leonard Swett. And after 2 hours of going up one side and down the other on all the pros and cons, what's in, what's out, all of that, Lincoln said, "Thank you very much. I have my answer. You're going to have to leave now because I've got a cabinet meeting." And Leonard Swett walked out of the room and reported that he had never, ever said a word. He was there as the sounding board for Lincoln. Lincoln was driving the process. Lincoln was getting clear in his own mind, but he couldn't do it without another human being in the process. That's the essence of self-coaching. You can't get clear about these things without another human being in the process. It's one of the powers of having an executive coach, but you don't need that person to be the trained individual, highly compensated individual. If you've got a good process to follow, you take responsibility for driving it. Anyone who knows and cares about you can serve as the coach. So the thing that I add to the book, in addition to what you said around the insights around who you are, what that might mean in terms of career choices, whether you stay in a job or move, is a process for dialoguing with another human being so that you get very clear in your own mind and you don't bedoozle yourself in the process.
So does the other person need to be trained in any way by the person going through the self-coaching process to be able to dialogue with them?
Not from the book of you, no. That individual only needs to know and care about the individual that he or she is serving as a coach for, because I provide all of the questions and all of the instructions. And so I will say to the coachee, take this piece of information, show it to your coach, and you talk about the following questions. So that's the mechanism by which we do it in the book of you. Now, I have since taken that a little bit further, and I'm running workshops, which I run publicly and run inside companies, where I essentially teach peer coaching. And it builds off of the book of you. We use the book of you in the process, but we take it a step further. And I provide some additional tools for the individuals that are serving as the coaches. But in reality, a coachee can do the same thing with anyone by just handing them the tools, because good coaching tools are essentially good questions.
Right. Good questions and good listening.
Correct.
Yeah, I just made a video about that. Like, you don't have to, go to extensive training on how to be a coach. You just need to know how to ask questions and listen and ask for action. Is really kind of three things that can make you a good coach. And of course, caring about the person is essential. Can you give me, do you have any story to tell about somebody that went through this process, and what did they discover, and how did it transform their situation?
Yeah, let me tell a story about an entrepreneur. In this case, it was primarily a solopreneur.
Okay.
Actually ran a catering business.
Okay.
And she focused primarily on catering lunches and cookies. So her business would start early in the morning. She would prepare food for catered lunches for businesses, and then she had a cookie outfit after lunch, and then she would shut down about 2, and then come in the next day and do the same thing all over again. For various reasons, she decided that she needed to close that business. And she was perplexed about, what do I do next? And so she actually went through one of my workshops, but she was using the book of you. And one of the things that we discovered in that process is that she had a very intense liking for the outdoors. And that was really important to her. And the way she satisfied that interest, which was almost to the point of being a need, was when she got off of work at 2, the first thing she did was to go take her dogs for a long walk through the woods. That became really, really important as a part of the routine. But as she was looking at what she was going to do next vocationally, that didn't pop into her mind, because that was outside of work. But in fact, it was a very important component of looking at what it was she needed to do next. And as we went through, it didn't take a whole lot more sleuthing to figure out what actually her next role was, and that was to become a dog trainer. because she loved the dogs. It kept her outside. It gave her the freedom that she had in the previous business. So that's what she's doing now, and she just loves it.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people are skilled at something that they don't really love. And, you know, they may have studied something that their parents told them they should do. And that's very common. And they end up doing things that they never really studied for, but they enjoy more and they find more satisfaction. And they develop the skill set because they enjoy the work associated with it. And I've seen that quite a bit as well.
You know, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours rule, you get really good at something if you spend 10,000 hours on it. When people spend a lot of time on interests and skills are not the same thing.
Right.
But people tend to develop skills in their interest areas because they love it and they're spending so much time in it. So if you're really focused on your interest areas, that those 10,000 hours will add up really, really fast.
Yeah. So it would actually be, you know, you've piqued my interest. It would be interesting to learn more about this and actually see how somebody can be coached. Let's say somebody who has, like, one of my issues is starting too many things and then not finishing them all and becoming frustrated. Could your book help with something as simple as that?
Yes, because it would likely point out why you were doing that. Are you doing that because you have a skill at juggling or a strength at juggling a whole lot of balls? Or are you doing that because you have a fundamental need not to get bored? What is the underlying reason why that you're actually doing that? And the reason that's important to understand is what you do about it is going to be dependent upon whether you're dealing with a strength, which tends to be a little more flexible, or you're dealing with a need, which is not as flexible. So if you have a need to have a whole bunch of variety in your work, you can find a way to pare down. But if you pare down too much, it's going to backfire on you. You're going to get bored, and it's actually going to be even more detrimental than getting too many things going.
Makes sense. So if somebody wanted to learn more about this and actually go through the process themselves, how would they go about it? How would they connect with you and go through this?
Well, there are two ways that someone could connect with me. You could go to bookofyou.com, the address that's there, and you will see when my workshops are. You can also get a book of you if you want. So that's one way. Or you can go to saraebrown.com. That's my other website. You can make contact with me that way. You can make contact with me from either one of those websites, as a matter of fact. But if you go to saraebrown.com and sign up for my newsletter, you'll get an excerpt from one of my books, which can actually get you started going down this process. It's actually an excerpt from my book called Let Your Personality Be Your Career Guide. And it talks about exercises you can do in addition or instead of the Berkman method to actually begin to understand what your own interests, strengths, and needs are, and begin to look at how you might translate that into career choices.
Great. So I'll put links to that in the description of this video, and people can check that out and get on the path of learning more about themselves and their challenges, whether it's for personal development in their current situation or for a new career path. Anything that you'd like to add that we didn't cover so far?
I think we pretty much covered the gambit there.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Let me just switch back to the gallery view here. So yeah, so thank you again. I really appreciate it. I think I would like to check this out. Maybe I could take this and you write a book about me and we could record it and do a coaching session to demonstrate it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that would be wildly fun.
I'd love that.
That would be great.
All right, I'll connect with you after and talk about organizing that. So thank you again. For those here for the first time, if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. Turn on notifications so you get news of new videos. I also have things that I offer for free, some tools on my website, some templates, worksheets that you could check out. You could go to there's a link in the description of this video for those as well. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.